Dry fire tools. What do we need for dry fire and what do we want for dry fire? The only thing you need for dry fire is your pistol. Yeah, wow. Okay. With just your pistol and some points of reference to aim at in your house, you can get to an insane level of skill on your trigger and with your firearms fundamentals. That's it. Now most people have a hard time and they get bored with that pretty quick. There's a lot of ways you can enhance your dry fire to make it closer to the real thing and also more enjoyable so that it's a habit that you get to every single day. The more we can make it a daily habit that's ingrained in our lifestyle, the quicker we're going to become better shooters. If we were to become 1% better at our firearm skill sets per day, after a year of this, we'd be 37 times more proficient with our firearm. That's awesome. Let's do that. We've already made a dry fire schedule, so you don't need to think about what you need to do. You just need to do it. An easy thing we can do is to set up a dry fire area in our house where targets are already laid up in various manners. Remember, you don't have to get crazy with your targets. You can literally use a piece of paper, and then as we get better with our accuracy and our speed, you can fold it in half and then fold it in quarters and set up more on the walls to begin our transitions. The concept of dry fire is the same thing as going to the gym daily and working on that progressive overload for our muscles. Once we start seeing that we're hitting the metrics that we want to push those boundaries further so our speed increases and our accuracy increases. For me, what I've done in my dry fire area to make it even more convenient is I've bought a very small pistol safe and I've bolted it to my table so that my pistol's ready and available for me when I go down in my time window that I have. There's no live ammunition in any of the dry fire area. With that said, even if you are a pro swimmer, there's still a reason why we bring a life jacket on a boat. For this same principle, we should have some type of medical aid or emergency plan in place in our dry fire area. I'm not going to tell you exactly what to put in these kits because that's not my area of expertise, but get that information from someone reputable and get it prepared for yourself. If you're on a tight budget and you have your pistol, you're prepared to dry fire right now. So don't use any other excuse to push your skill set into the future. Start training now. All right, the things we want for dry fire, starting at the low budget end, is definitely a timer of some sort. There are a bunch of apps you can throw on your phone that give you a random delay start timer and a par timer, which is just an end beep telling you should have finished whatever you were doing. These are very essential as we move forward into our dry fire series to build our skill set of accuracy and speed. Some of them even offer a sensitivity setting that can detect your trigger press and give you a time. The next thing we want once we have some type of timer is a way to record our times. Whether that's in a notebook, on your phone, or a whiteboard like this, you need some type of log to ensure that there's some forward progress and you're not staying stagnant at the same time and accuracy standard. These numbers along the top in the box are my last recorded averages from my previous session that I want to at least match or try to beat for my next session. We're going to be getting more into the system in the later lessons of the course. Another way to bring the practicality and enjoyment of your dry fire up a bit is to find a way to reset your trigger. You can either train with one trigger break and then simulating the pressure required on the follow-up shots by pushing your finger into the trigger and pulling it off to the same amount of travel that the trigger would have. But this isn't quite as consistent as having a fully resetting trigger. On a double action firearm, you can do the full realistic double action trigger press. On a double action single action gun, your first trigger press in dry fire will be identical to your live fire. However, the subsequent trigger pulls aren't going to be the same because it won't be in single action. There are many companies now that offer tools to help you reset the trigger on your firearm. A very cheap way that you can simulate a resetting trigger is to use a piece of paper or some cardboard. All we're going to do is rip a small piece off, fold it up, open the action on your firearm so the slide is out of battery, and then wedge the piece of paper or cardboard in between the ejection port and the barrel. And now we have a trigger that doesn't break, but at least pushes itself back to a point that we can apply some pressure on it. Keep in mind that this isn't going to have the same wall or friction as your regular trigger, but it at least will give you some tactile response to do some quick double taps or multiple trigger presses. Something that you likely will want in your firearms journey and in your dry fire is what are called snap caps or dummy rounds. These are rounds that you can place into the chamber of your firearm so that your firing pin has something to smack against. These will actually make your firearm behave a little bit differently on the trigger break because the firing pin actually has something to contact when it is released. The other thing that people use snap caps for is to put a little bit of weight in your magazines and to actually do some firearms manipulations where you have rounds ejecting from the slide. Snap caps will also give you that bullet index point on your magazines, as well as give you some realistic reloads. If you don't have snap caps yet, or you just want some more magazines to reload with, one way you can overcome your slide locking is to get something to wedge the follower down a little bit so the slide doesn't get stopped by that on the way back. That also is going to make your slide lock lever a little bit easier to release when it is locked back. Now, some people use quarters or dimes, anything to get that wedged down just a little bit. There's also companies that sell little tools like these that you can push right into the magazine, and that will stop it from locking back. Laser bullets like these are also a good option for cheap. These sit in the chamber of your real firearm, and then your firing pin strikes this little rubber pad, which emits a laser. And they come in all sorts of calibers. That little laser being emitted can be used on a piece of paper to show where your hits are landing up, or a reactive target, a simulator. Just remember that your trigger will not be resetting while using these. If you're looking at becoming competitive and serious in this sport, you are going to want to get a dedicated timer, because the phone apps just unfortunately aren't as consistent and reliable with their reporting as an actual dedicated shot timer is. The unfortunate thing about that news is that these are extremely expensive for what they are. The cheapest one you can get right now is likely this, which is about $100, and they range all the way up to $300. Keep in mind, however, that not all shot timers on the market can detect dry fire. There's only a couple that I know of right now that can detect the trigger break, and if you're gonna spend the money on a shot timer, just get one that can do dry fire and live fire reliably. Now that we're into the more expensive options to enhance your dry fire, let's get into the resetting triggers. Both of these are dedicated dry fire training pistols. They cannot shoot live rounds. They both have resetting triggers, and they both shoot lasers out of the barrel, which we can use to assist us with our shot placement. A lot of companies now offer reactive targets, which will respond to the laser, and when the laser hits it, it will either make a sound or record a score or placement on the target. If you want to spend a ton of money, there's also simulators that work with these laser pistols, so you can get a very accurate representation of real live fire. Keep in mind, however, that the triggers on these are not going to be identical to your real firearm. And if trigger control is one of the primary fundamentals for us to get good at for our shot placement, then it's probably not the best idea to spend the majority of your training time on a trigger that doesn't match your real firearm. But you can practice your firearms manipulations, including your draws with them. We can do reloads and malfunction clearances. If you use these tools with or without a simulator, it is a good option for you to spruce up your dry fire once in a while and keep the habit strong. This barrel goes into your actual live fire pistol, meaning that you can use your trigger, your sights, and your grip and have a resetting trigger with a little bit of recoil. And it just runs on some cheap CO2. Just keep in mind that the recoil impulse is a little bit different. If you pair this with a reactive target or a full-out simulator, it's about as close as you can get to a live fire feel in dry fire training, which keeps it pretty fun, but it's also a pretty cost-prohibitive option. Regardless of all these tools available to us, all we need is our pistol to reach that high mastery level. A benefit of these tools is that it can spruce up our dry fire training and keep our drive high to continue our habit and increase our skill. I'll repeat, you don't need any of these to get to a high mastery level in shooting skill. If you can stay thoughtful on the trigger and focus on all the building blocks of shooting while you're doing your dry fire, then you don't need those tools. However, if you find yourself drifting off and having a difficulty to focus and be thoughtful during your dry fire session, then some of these tools can help it be more engaging for you. Remember, make it easy, keep your kit prepared, and the time set aside to do it. Think first and prepare.